In the spring of 2008, in the industrial city of Shijiazhuang, letters and phone calls began arriving at the headquarters of the Sanlu Group, China's largest producer of powdered infant formula. Parents from Gansu province, hundreds of miles away, said their babies were crying in pain, passing dark urine, and developing hard lumps in their kidneys. Doctors were baffled. The babies were healthy at birth. Their only common thread was the tin of white powder their mothers mixed into warm water every morning. Sanlu's own records, later produced in court, showed the company had received its first complaints as early as December 2007. By March 2008, an internal team had traced the problem to something in the formula itself. What they found was not spoiled milk or a contaminated batch. It was a chemical that should never have been anywhere near a baby's bottle. Melamine, an industrial compound used to make plastics, countertops, and fertilizer. Melamine is cheap, and it has one deceptively useful property. It is rich in nitrogen. For decades, the standard dairy buyers used to check protein content in raw milk measured nitrogen levels, on the assumption that nitrogen in milk comes from protein. Unscrupulous middlemen at rural milk collection stations had discovered they could water down raw milk to stretch their profits, then mask the dilution by stirring in a spoonful of melamine, tricking the protein test into reading normal. It was, in effect, a counterfeit of nutrition itself, a chemical trick that made watered-down milk look richer on paper while delivering nothing a growing infant's body could use, and everything a growing infant's kidneys could not process. Investigators later found that a farmer named Zhang Yujun had built an entire cottage industry around it, producing over 600 tons of melamine-laced protein powder and selling it to dozens of milk stations across Hebei province, who then sold the adulterated milk up the chain to Sanlu and other dairy companies with no idea or no concern for what was mixed inside. By May 20, 2008, the crisis had reached Sanlu's boardroom. Executives ordered third-party testing, and by early June, internal lab results confirmed melamine was present in their formula at levels that would later be measured as high as 2,563 milligrams per kilogram, more than 1,000 times what food safety regulators would eventually deem an absolute upper limit. Rather than pull the product, recall it, or alert the public, Sanlu's leadership, led by chairwoman and general manager Tian Wenhua, made a different calculation. China was weeks away from hosting the Beijing Olympics. A recall would be a national embarrassment, an admission of failure at the worst possible moment. According to trial testimony, Tian ordered production to continue and told local officials nothing. Contaminated formula kept shipping. It kept reaching store shelves, kept reaching mothers who trusted the Sanlu name, a company so respected it had donated milk powder to orphanages after the devastating Sichuan earthquake that May. Babies who had already survived one catastrophe were now, unknowingly, drinking poison served up by the very company that had tried to look like a hero.
The truth surfaced not through Chinese regulators, but through a foreign business partner. Fonterra, the New Zealand dairy cooperative that held a 43% stake in Sanlu, learned of the contamination on August 2 and pushed for an immediate public recall. When Chinese officials moved too slowly for their comfort, Fonterra alerted its own government, and on September 8th, New Zealand's government directly confronted Beijing. Only then, on September 11th and 12th, did China's Ministry of Health and state media make the scandal public. The numbers that followed were staggering. Roughly 300,000 infants and young children were ultimately affected. Nearly 54,000 were hospitalized, many with severe kidney stones requiring surgery. At least 6 babies died, though parent advocacy groups have long argued the true toll was covered up and higher. Investigators soon discovered the contamination was not confined to Sanlu. Testing revealed that products from 21 other dairy companies, including major names like Mengniu and Yili, also contained melamine, meaning the practice of adulterating raw milk had spread quietly across the entire supply chain for months, possibly years, before anyone in a position of power decided the truth mattered more than the Olympics or the balance sheet. The reckoning, when it came, was swift and severe by any international standard. China's government, eager to demonstrate control after global outrage and import bans from at least 11 countries, prosecuted the case aggressively. 21 people stood trial. Tian Wenhu was sentenced to life in prison in January 2009 for producing and selling substandard products and fined roughly $2.5 million. 3 other Sanlu executives received prison terms between 5 and 15 years. 2 men further down the supply chain, Chang Yuzhuan and Zhang Junping, were sentenced to death, and both were executed in November 2009. Sanlu itself was fined more than $7 million and declared bankrupt in February 2009, unable to cover the mounting medical costs and compensation claims of the families it had poisoned. A national compensation fund was eventually set up, offering payouts to affected families, though many parents said the amounts and the speed of the process fell far short of what their children's ongoing medical needs required. The scandal's legacy reshaped food safety policy across China and reverberated through international trade for years. China enacted a sweeping new food safety law in 2009, tightening oversight of dairy production and supply chain testing. Melamine testing became standard practice for infant formula worldwide, and countries that once imported freely from China imposed lasting scrutiny on its dairy exports. Chinese consumers, for their part, never fully trusted domestically produced infant formula again. The scandal fueled a lucrative gray market of parents traveling abroad or paying steep prices for imported formula, a consumer trust wound that persisted more than a decade later. For a case built on the simple, brutal arithmetic of turning cheaper, watered-down milk into apparent profit, the true cost was measured not in yuan, but in the kidneys of infants who never had a choice in what they were fed, and in a food safety scandal that, even executions and life sentences aside, could never be fully paid back to the families who trusted a label that said only milk.